Hi, this is Reine. Sounds like green. I'm a Minnesota realtor helping families get through probate with more money and less stress. And today I'm joined by Minnesota attorney Mai Yang from My Minnesota Estate Attorney. Mai specializes in estate planning, estate administration, and real estate matters for families right here in the Twin Cities. And her practice focuses on providing personalized solutions tailored to each family's unique situation. Mai, welcome to the Probate Help Desk podcast, and please tell us a little bit about yourself and what drew you into this line of work.
Irene, thanks for having me here. As I was telling you, this is exciting because um, what really drew me to this area is education, right? Most of us, we don't really know very much about estate planning or estate administration until we experience it ourselves.
Yeah.
So I first learned or was exposed to this when I was working. Um, so I worked throughout law school, and the very first law firm I worked at was a small firm that did business and real estate and estate planning. So
Mm.
that's where I really first learned it, and it really just blew my mind at the time because I see how much this can help family members if they can do a little bit of thinking ahead and a little bit of planning, how much it can save your family and time and money on the back end after you're gone. So that's where I really started it. And then after that, I transitioned to um, working at the Ramsey County Courthouse with the judges there, doing probate and guardianships and conservatorships, and for a couple of years. And then after that, I went to Hennepin County Probate Court. And so I really got to see from the on the back end how messy probate can get and how complicated it can get. And through that experience, I really learned how important and how valuable proper planning can be. Um, so really that as an attorney, that's my job or my goal is to educate all of my clients through for that whole process, right? How you plan properly at the beginning and so that you know you can avoid all of the mess at the end. And also for people who don't plan at the end, how I can help them streamline or understand how the process is going to work and make it a little bit easier for them when they're already grieving the loss of a loved one, right? So that's
Yeah,
really how I approach all my relationships and all of my clients is education and guidance through the whole process.
I am so glad that you said that because especially the education piece, one of the things I mentioned that I have experience as a personal representative. It's a job that you don't really want. Nobody wants that job, and you don't have experience, right? A lot of times it's a one and done. And so a lot of people are offering advice, but it's not always good advice. Right? They have good intentions, but they might not have good advice.
Exactly. It might be true for your situation, but not necessarily true for somebody else's situation.
Yeah.
And so that's where there's all this nuance. Like, yes, this happened with your friend's grandma, but they didn't have this issue or they didn't have this asset. And this is why this is your situation is different.
Mhm.
And so yes, it is one person's experience is going to be different from another's. And from my perspective, I've seen so many different, and I'm not saying I've seen everything,
Right.
but I've seen so many different situations and how things can play out that having, and I will be sounding very biased, but having an attorney who does this daily, help you through it is instrumental in just getting things done quickly and accurately.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that you started out doing cases in Ramsey County and you've also done cases in Hennepin County. And for people who are outside of the Twin Cities or outside of Minnesota, those are the two counties in Minnesota that have but just a ton of cases. I think Hennepin has the most, Ramsey probably second.
Second. Yeah,
Yeah,
close second. Yep.
close second. And you have within those counties you have some rural areas, you have residential areas, you have urban areas. They're just there's such a variety that you probably have seen it all working those two counties.
It's a lot. Yeah, we've seen a lot of different situations. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to go off script and ask a question. You made me think about this when you were talking about working in Ramsey and starting to kind of get to know how probate worked in Ramsey, and I make the assumption that probate is similar throughout the state of Minnesota. Each county might deviate in their processes a little bit, but you have different clerks and different judges. Is it an advantage or beneficial for a family to have an attorney who is familiar with those local processes and maybe even some of the judges that might be working those cases?
There is definitely an advantage. This is a problem nationwide. In the rural areas, there are less attorneys who serve those areas, right? And so when you don't have enough attorneys to help people there, they come to attorneys in the metro area. But attorneys in the metro area, for the most part, have experience with cases in the metro area. And so the courts, although the rules are the same, the courts apply the rules a little differently. So procedurally, everything is a little different. Um, so some courts might require one document every single time, but other courts are a little bit more relaxed and they won't require it. And so with having an attorney be familiar with a specific county, for example, that attorney would know what documents are required, what's not, and get things done maybe a little bit quicker because they know what the turnaround times are with that specific county. So yes, it is important to have an attorney who's familiar with that specific county.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I agree 100%. And another question that I have for you is on your website, you discuss the importance of timing with estate planning. And so, from your perspective, what are some of the life events that should trigger someone to create or update their estate plan?
So from my perspective, estate planning is an umbrella term, right? The umbrella term covers all sorts of planning that you do throughout your life. Um, as soon as so for children, right, for young adults, as soon as they turn 18, I always recommend that all of them have at least two or three documents done. It's a power of attorney and a healthcare directive, and part of that is the HIPAA authorization. Because
Hmm.
once you turn 18, your parents no longer have legal authority to help you with anything, right? I mean, they can still help you, but if you become incapacitated, your parents have to go through guardianship and conservatorship, which is a pretty lengthy process and very public and unnecessary if you just sign those three documents ahead of time as soon as you turn 18, right? So at a minimum, that's what I recommend for all of my clients. If you have a child that is 17, schedule an appointment to meet with me the month, a week or two after they turn 18, so we can get this done. And so if they go off to college and something happens, you have the documents you need to be able to help them. Um, Aside from that, so 18 is when you should get at least those documents done. The next step is when you start working and you start accumulating assets, you have, a house. If always, if you have a house, do your estate plan because your house is going to be, for most of us, it's your biggest asset. And it's usually the assets that triggers the need for probate.
Yeah.
Because if you don't plan properly with your real estate, the only way you transfer that real estate is through the probate process.
Mhm.
And that's a minimum of 2 to 6 months in the metro area here to get someone with legal authority to sell it or to, transfer it. Um, so when you purchase your first house is when you should have that. Or when you get married. When
Mhm.
you get married and you start having kids, that's when you should have your estate plan done. I compare an estate plan to a car, right? You have a car for 3 to 5 years, you sell it, you buy a new one. Every stage of life, you have a different car. Your estate plan serves the same purpose. So when you're 18 to 25, you're still young, you have a not as robust of an estate plan, but you have something done. When you move into marriage and you have your own family, that's another stage that needs to be reviewed and updated for your estate plan. When your assets grow, if you hit the lottery, right?
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
if you hit the lottery, that's when you would have to, number one, do an estate plan if you don't already have one, or update your estate plan. And then what most people do is they think about estate planning when they're ready to retire. And that's good that they're thinking about that. But if life is unpredictable. So you don't know if you're even going to get to retirement age. But that's when you would do the next stage of planning is when you're retired or close to retirement age, your kids are going to be old.
Hmm.
They have their own lives. Each of them, they might have different life situations. So your estate plan, when you created it 30 years ago, when they were 2 and 4 years old, it's not going to match what you need today.
Right.
So periodic reviews. This is what I do for all of my clients is once you sign your documents with me, I put it on my calendar to check up with you every 3 to 5 years
Mhm.
to see if things have updated and if anything needs to be changed or if your estate plan still works for you. And that's a courtesy that I do for all of my clients. It's not an additional charge or anything like that, because I want their estate plan to keep working for them
Right.
and still be what they need 3 to 5 years from now.
That's fantastic. Wow. So I always say that I learned something new in every single interview that, and I just when you started talking about 18-year-olds and some of the documents that they should have, I, a light bulb went off my head. As a parent, we struggle with that constantly, right? One of our kids might need medication and they want us to help them. We can't, you know,
Right.
or it's difficult. It's very,
Yes.
oh, that's tremendous advice. And then also with the estate plan, um, because you and I both in our work, we get questions about how can we avoid probate. And a lot of times people ask me that question after it's too late, after someone has already passed away. And estate planning with an attorney is one of the best ways that I can think of um, to do it. I know there are people that they do the do it yourself and they maybe do a transfer on death deed or they do a POD on their bank account or something like that. And but they don't really look at everything they need to look at and then they don't realize they have problems until they have a problem. Um,
Right.
so so that is really good advice. And then updating those plans as you mentioned with major life events, getting married, buying a house, or accumulating assets, getting ready to those. And I'm really impressed with that service that you provide by just doing free reviews well, you didn't say free reviews, but
It
ongoing.
is free. It is
It
free.
is free.
I don't charge, if I meet with mom and dad, right, and they're elderly and they want to just do their estate plan, and then a couple years later they want to meet with their kids so
Mhm.
that their kids know what their plan is. I won't charge for that because I want their family to be confident in the plan that I wrote for their parents. And also once their parents are gone, I want to be here as a resource for them, right? They only have a set of parents. They're not very likely going to have anyone else to administer the estate. So this is probably going to be the first estate that they have to administer. And I
Mhm.
want to be there for as a guide for them because it's peace of mind, right? You want to know that you're doing what you're doing is right and that you're crossing all your T's, dotting all of your I's. And so that meeting, I do not charge. It's a complimentary service that I give to all of my clients.
Oh, that is fantastic. So you're really working with that family throughout the entire process from some of these people from the time they're 18 and they come up with their very first documents all the way through till retirement. Wow.
Yes, yes. And I don't, so that all I do is estate planning and estate administration and some real estate work.
Hmm.
So I can't help them with criminal matters, but I know
Right.
attorneys who are criminal attorneys. So I hope that my clients have enough trust in me to come to me if they ever need those types of services, that they would ask me for a referral and I can point them to attorneys who I know treat their clients the way I would treat my own client, right?
Hmm.
You can go to Google and find the first or second recommendation on Google who paid the most to have their firm at the top.
Yep.
But
Yep.
they're not necessarily going to give you the level of service that I would give to my clients. And so I always tell my clients, if you look, if there's anything legal wise that you need assistance with, let me know, and I can vet some of these attorneys out for you. I can point you to attorneys that I think would be able to help you well.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, that's very similar to the way that I approach my real estate business also. If I'm working with a family who says, Reen, we're going with a cash buyer, we don't need a realtor. That's great. I know who the good cash buyers are and I know who the not so good cash buyers are. And
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
so I like to provide those concierge services also. Because I want my clients to do well and I want them to leave better than they were when they found me. And so
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
means sometimes I have to farm out work to other people who can do it better than I can. And so I really appreciate that. You also then, so you talked a lot about the estate planning process. And then there are the scenarios where maybe someone didn't do estate planning, or maybe they thought they had it covered, but they made mistakes, or they didn't, and the family doesn't realize that until after their loved one has passed away. And that leads us into probate. Um, what are some of, and on your website you have in your blog, and I'll put a link in the show notes, you have a great article that talks about some of the steps that you could take after a loved one passes away. Could you just talk about a few steps that you think are critical that families should take into consideration with they find themselves in a situation where someone has passed away, they maybe they have a will and they still need to go through probate, or maybe they haven't done anything and they're not sure where to start. How do you usually help those families?
Yeah, so documentation is the most important thing. You won't be able to start the probate process until you have some sort of documentation, right? You need to
Mm,
know if they had a will, so search the house or their apartment where they lived. Look for documents from attorneys that might indicate that they have a will. Some attorneys hang on to the original documents and give a copy to the clients. Um, Other attorneys give the originals to the client. So it varies. But number one is look for an original or a copy of a will or a trust, and then look for copies of bank statements,
mm,
um, property tax statements, things like that. And the more recent ones, the better. Life insurance policies, statements, things like that. Um, Look for all of that and then keep them all together so that when you meet with the attorney, the attorney will know how to proceed. Sometimes family members can contact the life insurance company, for example,
hmm.
and ask if they are a beneficiary. If they are, then the companies will tell them if they are, but if they're not, then the companies will say, no, we can't give you any information.
Yes.
So that's a telltale sign that there was no beneficiary on that account. Is if you call them, for example, hey, my name is my dad just died. Am I a beneficiary on his account? You have to ask it that way
Hmm.
instead of you asking it from somebody else's perspective. That way they know that they're talking to the beneficiary. And then at that point, then they can tell you if you are or if you're not. Um, so when you find statements, call all of those companies to see if they have beneficiaries. That'll also give you an idea of whether probate is needed.
Hmm.
In Minnesota, if the entire estate, so the estate just means everything that you owned in your name, right? When you passed away. So if the probate estate is over $75,000 or more, then you have to go to probate court.
Right.
And if one thing has to go to probate court, everything has to go to probate court. It's not piecemeal. If one account is 5,000, the other is 70, only one account needs to go. Everything needs to go. Um, and then and real estate. So if there's real estate that doesn't have like a transfer or death deed on it, that automatically goes to probate court. So kind of gathering information is the very first step.
Hmm.
Um, a very close second step is protecting the assets. So making sure that the house is secured if there's a house, that doors are locked, windows are locked, that no one unauthorized has access to the house. I know a lot of people like to keep collectibles and valuables in the house. Make sure the whole family is there and everyone knows that the jewelry is being kept at somebody's house, and this is the jewelry that was found at the house, so that there's an inventory so that nothing goes missing. And if it does, who was there and who could have taken it, things like that. You don't want to think about those things, but unfortunately, having seen, hundreds and hundreds of cases, um, unfortunately, it does happen. So making sure that everyone is aware of what's going on will help for a smoother process once you do go into probate.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, again, a lot of good nuggets of information in there. And one of the questions I was going to ask, you're talking about securing the property. one of the things that I recommend to my clients and their attorneys is also check the insurance on the property because sometimes a lot of the companies have these loopholes. Well, I call it a loophole, they don't. But in the policy, if the house is vacant and the person's passed away, the house might not be covered. And a lot of times that's the largest asset in the estate. And you think it's insured, but it's not. And in some of our counties, people will break in and steal the copper pipes, or squatters will try to get in there. Um, so yes, definitely secure the house. I was going to ask you, you talked about, making sure you know who has access and who doesn't. Do you have any tips for dealing with squatters in a probate situation? I know what I typically do, and I know it can be difficult, and there are some nuances in this scenario, but do you have any tips that you could
I
share?
don't. It's rare. So
Hmm.
in the more common one is that a family member was living there, right? And so they're technically treated as a tenant, not a squatter. So
Hmm.
then you have to now you're into landlord tenant law
Yeah.
where and I don't handle this part of it. I usually refer it out to a colleague who does this all the time. Um, but you'd have to then go into real estate law where you have to follow the rules about how to get them out and give them the proper notices and things like that. But yes, definitely I refer those out. So I unfortunately don't have any specific information I can give about that.
That question comes up so often. I'm actually thinking of just inviting one of the sheriffs onto the podcast. Just and see if my assumption, because some of the things I've tried have worked and other times they don't. Sometimes it depends which judge you're in front of, and I would love to hear the sheriff's perspective on that. So I like to ask that question, and I agree 100% with everything you just said. Um, so you talked about securing the property, gathering up all the documents, and one of the other things that I found when it comes to gathering documents, if you're monitoring the mailbox or if you have access to the online banking or bank statements, a lot of times that gives a lot of clues as to where money's coming in and where money's going out as well. Um, so so they've gathered all this information, is that when then they should come and speak with an attorney like you? They have in fact, in your case, do you require them to have a death certificate before they come and see you, or you'll just start talking to them as soon as they're ready?
So the initial consultation, they don't need the death certificate, but nothing can be filed with the court until they have the death certificate or some other proof of death. Usually the funeral director, the funeral home director will give you some sort of documentation that they've
Hmm.
accepted the body, and usually that's sufficient. So if this is a scenario where time is of the essence and we need to get the ball rolling right away, then yes, I'll start working on it and then file the documents without the death certificate. And then once that comes in, then we file it after.
Okay. And you mentioned a little bit about real estate as well, which is an area of interest to me. Do you handle cases with real estate much differently than cases without real estate, or from an attorney's perspective, how does the real estate impact the probate case?
It impacts it in a way that so the main thing that would impact it is if the decedent received medical assistance
Hmm.
while they were alive, because if they are, the county will file a claim against the real estate, and then
Hmm.
that's a little bit more complicated. Um, but really, that's it. Really,
Okay.
that's it. The house is going to be either going to be sold, or the kids are or the family members are just going to take it. Um, and then they'll handle it themselves after. But for the most part, they're treated pretty similarly.
Okay. That's a really good tip as well. And we run into that on the real estate side. Sometimes we will have a family who's dealing with I call them traditional realtors who might not know a lot about the probate process. And they don't realize that they need the letters from the court or the certificate of medical clearance. And they list the house and they get a great offer. And then they find out that they're going to be held up because they didn't
Exactly.
jump through some of these hoops. And so
Yeah,
those are,
and then And I've actually had a lot of cases in that scenario where there's a special process, a probate process, where you get someone appointed very quickly for those situations. Otherwise, you're going to lose that buyer.
Mhm.
So I've helped quite a few people with that as well, just to get them appointed for that limited purpose to finish that transaction so they
Oh
don't
yeah,
lose that sale.
absolutely. For
But it's
something
more
like
work than necessary. If you have the right realtor who knows what they're doing and got all their ducks in a row before you sign the contract, it's going to be much more efficient for the family and more cost friendly than listing the house for sale and then finding out after the fact.
absolutely. In fact, one of the things I like to do is I like to ask the personal representative if it's okay for me to have a call with the attorney so that we can make sure we're all on the same page as far as our plan and so that I make sure that the documents get signed in the way that the attorney wants them signed.
Mhm.
Because if not, you know, the cash register, you can
Yeah,
hear it.
and a lot of amendments because you got the person's name wrong or the
Right.
title wrong and it's not correct and you have to wait for the documents from the court. So for types of cases like this, it really is a team effort to make sure that
Mhm.
it gets completed correctly. And so I always appreciate when the people on my team that I'm working with know the process and it makes it a smoother.
Yeah, and it's what I like about that too is some attorneys approach it differently, and so we get to learn a lot about why attorney A will do this and why attorney B would rather do that, and I find it fascinating. But what scares me is either when there is no attorney or I don't get any insight as to why the attorney wants to do it. I mean, we're always going to defer to what the attorney wants, but I just like to learn and know why they made the recommendations. And
Yeah.
a lot of times the PR is not going to ask; they just want to get the house sold. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, any other, what about, I'm going to throw one more scenario at you. What about those scenarios where maybe there was real estate involved and the family did not go through probate within, I think it's a 3-year window in Minnesota.
Mhm.
So they kind of, in Minnesota, my understanding is if you're going to go through probate or you need to, you should go within 3 years. What happens if you miss that window?
So the thing about the 3-year period is you have that time period to get a personal representative appointed. With a personal representative, that person steps into the shoes of the estate and they can manage the estate themselves without having a lot of hands in the cookie jar, right? Once that period passes, you move into what's called decree of descent territory.
Yep.
And with that, what happens is you present all of the facts to the court, and then you request a distribution, and it has to follow what the statutes say. Um, and then the court just issues a decree that says, yes, stamp of approval. This is how everything gets split up. So then
Mhm.
you have to take that decree to every bank, to every institution to get that those assets split up. So it's a lot more work. And sometimes it is not favorable because um, if you have the most common situation is mom and dad own the house, dad dies, right? And then mom just continues living there, continues
Yeah.
paying it. And then when she passes away 20 years later, the kids say, oh, now we have to go to probate, but it's too late because you have to do now two procedures, right? The first is for dad to transfer his interest over to mom. And then
Yeah.
the second probate is for mom to transfer her interest to the kids.
Yeah.
So this is now two procedures that it's going to be twice as costly and twice as long because you have to wait for one procedure to be pretty much done before the other one can be completed. Um, so it's inefficient and unfortunately it happens a lot
Yep.
because people think, that once they pass away, it just becomes mine, right?
I
But it
Yep.
doesn't. There's still legal processes that have to happen, exchanging, signing of paperwork, things like that.
And I see that on the real estate side, I see that in two situations. One is if a spouse passes away and the other spouse just assumes their name is on the title, right? And or maybe it is, like you mentioned, maybe their name is on the title, but they never took the other person's name off. Or the other scenario is where someone is in the will, it designates that someone's going to inherit the home, and they think that that's the magic document that makes everything happen. So they don't do anything except live in the house. And
Yes, yeah, and that's a misconception with estate planning is A lot of people think that the will is the document that proves that they get it,
Mm-hmm.
or they get the property or the house. But what they don't understand is you still have to go to probate court to probate that will.
Right.
It has to be reviewed, and everyone is given a chance to contest the will,
Yeah.
to make sure that, so it doesn't, having a will is a good, it's a good estate plan, but it's not what a lot of people think it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am going to go to a few questions from our Facebook community, Probate Help Desk. And the first question from our community is, how can the executor navigate IRS issues when filing a deceased person's final tax return? And so they're just looking for tips on, and I see in the group, I see a lot of people who often get confused between the final return for the decedent versus a return for the estate.
Yes. So I always recommend that. So first, I'm not a tax attorney, so I don't practice, file taxes or anything like that. But I always recommend that you consult with an accountant. Tell them what the situation is, what the income is, and they'll tell you if a return is needed. So yes, you're right. A lot of people don't realize that, so if dad dies in March of 2025, you still have to file a personal return for January through March. And
Mm.
then anything for the estate from April to the end of the year is its own tax return. It's not lumped into one. It's different. So yes, I unfortunately I don't have any more advice than that, but I always just recommend that you at least consult with an accountant who's familiar with this type of filings. It's different from your H&R Block representative, right?
Mm-hmm.
They only
Mm-hmm.
do very limited income tax returns for people who are alive, and even for the most part, just simple ones. Um, Accountants who are specifically experienced in trust and estate filings would be much more beneficial, especially if you're looking at hundreds and thousands of dollars that need to be accounted for and taxed. Because getting a surprise tax bill in the future is going to hurt worse than paying the accountant now to
Right.
make sure that it is done correctly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another question from our Facebook community is, what legal recourse exists when a caregiver or new spouse potentially manipulates a vulnerable person's estate planning documents near the end of their life?
So the caregiver is easier, the easier scenario here because usually a caregiver doesn't have any sort of rights to the person's estate, right? So if all of a sudden a will says caregiver gets 100%, then the signs of undue influence are much more likely and more um, easier to find there. Um, but for a new spouse, it's a little different because spouses, if you're legally married, you have certain spousal rights to your spouse's estate. Um, this these topics though are more litigation
Mm-hmm.
oriented.
Yep.
So you would need to talk, if you have these types of concerns, you need to talk to a probate litigation attorney. They will
Mm-hmm.
have way more experience than I would. I don't do any sort of litigation. So that's the really the extent of what I know is that, you need to talk to a probate litigation attorney. They'll be better equipped to advise you and tell you what the strengths and weaknesses of your case are than I would. But definitely, most consultations are free, so you're not wasting any money there. And with these types of cases, 100% hire an attorney. They will know what to look for in the documents. They will know. Unfortunately, there is an emotional aspect with it if you choose to go on your own with this.
Right.
And
Right.
having an
Right.
attorney who's uninterested and can look at it objectively can help you, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll see signs or things in the documents that you might have missed, and they can argue in your court for you. So yes, 100% hire an attorney to look at the documents for that.
And one thing I would add to that is, if you do a consultation with two or three attorneys and they all tell you the same thing, maybe
Yes.
there's a reason. Maybe there's a reason.
Yes.
Um, so I run into that, from time to time where someone will hire a fantastic attorney and then they don't want to take the attorney's advice. I'm like, well, that's why'd you hire a great attorney if you're not going to listen to the
Exactly, exactly.
like, well, learn, listen, and learn. Uh, one more from Facebook. Um, what do you do when there's personal property without clear documentation, like maybe farm equipment without a title or a vehicle without a title? What should the personal representative do during estate administration when they come across that?
So generally, if there's no will, right, or nothing that says specifically this property goes to this person, then gets split evenly between everyone.
Okay.
And that's the personal representative's job, is to make sure that things are done fairly. What people have done in the past is you put your names into a piece of, into a bucket or a hat, and you draw names to see who gets to pick something first. And then there is a dollar value attached to everything. So what you pick ultimately has to equal this similar amounts. And that's how you make it fair. There's also a distinction between who the beneficiaries are too. So
Mm,
if there's a spouse, the spouse has different rights from the kids. Um, and so it really depends on what the situation looks like. But usually that's how it's done. It's just kind of round robin. Everyone gets to pick one thing, or if you can't agree, then sell everything and just split the money evenly.
absolutely. That I've heard of families that do the one person said when his family did it, he described it as a draft. Like a sports thing.
Yep.
And I was like, that's really odd that you would compare sports to a probate situation, but he said that that was for their family, that worked out really well to put the names in and then everybody picked it.
Yep. Yep.
So I've heard good things about that. Um, we have one more question from Facebook. When What options does a family have when an executor, so someone in the will is the executor and they don't file for probate? Um, so it's their
So
responsibility. They're just not doing anything.
yes, if they are not willing to do it, usually the will say if person A is unwilling or unable to be my personal representative, then it goes to person B.
Hmm.
So if they're sitting on their hands and they're not doing anything, person B can step up and say, look, if you're not going to file this, I'll file it. And then they go to the court and they explain to the court, we've asked this person to do it multiple times. They're not responding. They're not willing to do anything. They haven't hired an attorney. They haven't done any research. The house is there is nothing has been done.
Hmm.
In that situation, the court will very likely skip person A and just go to person B.
Oh, okay.
Um, so there are other options. And if there are three people named in the will and all of them are gone or unwilling or unable to, then there are statutes about priority of people who can serve. So then it just goes down, if there's a spouse, then it's the spouse, the kids, and then other family members or next of kin. So there's a very exhaustive list of people who can petition.
Absolutely. We're getting ready to wrap up. Are there any other tips that you would like to leave our viewers with today? We covered a lot.
I think there's a lot, but I think if you probate is not a scary thing. I want to
Hmm.
just let people know that it's not a scary thing. It's time consuming and it's avoidable, but it's not a scary thing like a lot of us are led to believe, right?
Right.
So if you do have to go through probate, it's not the end of the world. Having someone on your side who knows the process and who can help you will make things a lot easier. But if you are thinking about this ahead of time now, just start planning your estate plan. So your family they don't have to go through what you're doing now, right? Having to deal with
Hmm.
probate and things like that. It's not terrible, but if you can avoid it, yeah, uh, you can avoid it by doing
Absolutely.
proper planning.
Absolutely. The estate planning, 100% recommend it. This has been incredibly helpful today. For families who need assistance with estate planning or probate, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, give me a call. My phone number, my office line is 651-506-6600, or you can shoot me an email. My email is mai@mymnea.com. Otherwise, you can go to my website. There's a scheduling form on my website, so you can schedule at your convenience.
And I will put all that information in the show notes as well. And one last question. Um, do you work exclusively with clients in the Twin Cities, or if someone's watching in another part of Minnesota, are you willing to talk to them as well?
Yeah, definitely willing to talk to them if it's not a complicated estate that requires someone in person in their county. I have helped people, in Polk County before. It's like a 3-hour drive from the cities. So it's not. I try to help as many people as I can, even if they're not, 30 minutes from my
Hmm.
office. But my office is in Roseville, so I think it's centrally located for a lot of people. But yes, definitely. Open and willing to helping people outside of the metro too.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I really appreciate your time today. We will have
Thanks,
links
Reem.
in the show notes, and we look forward to having you back to talk about probate and real estate.
Great. All right.
Thank,
Thanks for having me, Reem.
thank you, Mai.